In the year 2077, after millennia of armed conflict, the destructive nature of man could sustain itself no longer. The world was plunged into an abyss of nuclear fire and radiation.
Fallout 3 is the third game in the Fallout series, a trilogy of games set in an alternate future after a nuclear war has destroyed the planet. Humanity lives on, however, adapting and surviving in what is referred to as the Wasteland. Those lucky enough to avoid the apocalypse lived underground in vaults, special domiciles designed to be self-sustaining for as long as possible, governed by overseers that maintained the peace and served as a leader of sorts. Fallout 3 is set in Washington, with a large section of the map taking place in the ruins of DC, including the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. Fallout 3 is unique because it took the series away from its turn-based gameplay and combined the RPG elements with first-person shooting, in what so-called game journalists referred to as Oblivion with guns. Now, it does share some similarities with Bethesda's Elder Scrolls series, but it's by and large a totally different experience. It was released in 2008 for Microsoft Windows, PlayStation 3, and the Xbox 360. So in Fallout 3, you take on the role of a citizen of Vault 101, literally birthed at the start of the game, whose appearance is customizable by the player, and you live out the first 16 years of your life through a fast-paced prologue sequence. Your father, voiced by Liam Neeson, is a gifted scientist who worked on something called Project Purity long before you were born, and this introductory section does a good job at establishing him as a character. The goal of Project Purity was to attempt to make the radiated water of the Wasteland drinkable for the survivors, as purified water is something of a rarity, and every consumable in the world is affected by the radiation in a small way. During this introductory sequence, you're also able to build your class, choosing from base stats like strength, endurance, and agility, as well as choosing 3 skills to initially specialize in, things like lockpicking, sneaking, and different weapon categories. After this lengthy prologue, your dad leaves the vault to continue his work on Project Purity, literally causing total havoc in the process, and you're forced to leave the safety of the vault to find him. Thus begins your journey. The story is largely just a linear series of quests, and it's a shame that you don't really affect things too adversely. The outcome will always be the same regardless of how you end up there. But the story is really just a means of giving the player a larger goal. Once you leave the vault, you're free to do whatever the hell you want. Never does Fallout 3 ever force your hand. Every single action you do from there on in is left entirely up to you. Your first stop is going to be a nearby town called Megaton, which is built around a still active nuclear bomb. Now, straight off the bat, you find out there's parties interested in defusing the bomb and also another party interested in blowing it up, killing all of the inhabitants in the process. This has nothing to do with the main storyline at all, and not even 5 minutes after leaving Vault 101, and you're already facing a huge moral decision. Not only that, but you can also find a companion to accompany you on your journey. You can get a lengthy quest to help write a Wasteland survival guide, acquire your own house and customize it with upgrades and themes, or get involved in another quest line that will send you north to investigate a family of vampires. Now, this is just in the first town you come across. And that is if you even choose to stop at Megaton in the first place, and this is what Fallout 3 is all about. Moving around this huge game world, interacting with people, and getting caught up in all these little different stories, all of which often allow you to make choices that will affect your karma for better or worse.
I thought I was dead! You saved me!
There's really only 2 major factions you're dealing with in the game, and that's the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave, both trying to get their hands on Project Purity for different reasons, and yet for some reason the Brotherhood of Steel is labelled as the good guys. Aside from this, you're either up against mutated animals, super mutants, or bandits, all of which are hostile and will attack you on sight, for which you're free to kill as you wish. Lay a hand on anyone else, however, and the karma system comes into play. Stealing, lying, and killing innocent people is bad. Helping people and just being an all-around stand-up guy is good. The karma system actually works well for the most part, and your moral decisions aren't always black and white. There are inherent flaws in this system, though it is all too easy to be an absolute prick to people, then work your way back up to a high moral standing from doing something as menial as giving bottled water to hobos. Early on in the game, you're given the option to detonate the nuclear bomb in Megaton, killing all the inhabitants and earning you some serious negative karma. And yet again, even after doing something so maniacal, you can still clamber back up to a high karma level. Your skills are also going to play a big part in experience overall, essentially making it easier or harder depending on how you spec. You're always going to want to focus on at least one combat-orientated skill, be it small, big, or energy weapons. Explosives, unarmed, and melee weapons fill up the other offensive skills, but they're not all that useful or effective compared to the other weapon types. Sneak is the game's stealth skill, but this doesn't become that useful until you've put some serious points into it, and the only real benefit to it is picking pockets, which is something only players geared towards negative karma will usually lean towards anyway. Aside from this, you've also got lots of other factors to consider. The repair and medicine skill allow you to repair and maintain the conditions of your weapons and gear, and also dictate how much health you can restore from stimp packs. Lockpicking and science cover unlocking locked doors and hacking into computer terminals, and lastly, barter and speech affects social interactions, with barter allowing you to get better prices with buying and selling goods, and speech allowing you to talk your way through otherwise potentially hostile situations. The catch here is that none of these skills are really right or wrong, though some of them are questionably useful, and every person playing the game is always going to have a preferred build. Unlike the Elder Scrolls games, these skills don't improve the more you use them, and Fallout 3 has a traditional XP system, where you distribute points each time you level up. Personally, I always find myself going for a speech, small weapons, and lockpicking build, at least early on. This means I can talk my way through conversations, defend myself if need be, and unlock most locked doors, which is basically just free XP. But as I said, there's no right or wrong way to play it, and this is one of the game's biggest strengths. This is, as I said though, just early on in the game, and with the right configuration and know-how, it is possible to max out almost all of the skills. You can collect skill books that increase each skill by 1 or 2 points, or collect bobbleheads that also offer up a permanent bonus. Then there's a whole bunch of drugs and chemicals you can take as well to boost these skills temporarily, all of which you can become addicted to, not to mention inventory management, monitoring your radiation levels, and so forth. It's a lot to contend with. On top of all of that, you've also got perks which you can choose from each time you level up, offering up increased damage, better accuracy with certain weapon types, improved XP, and the list goes on. It's just astonishing the amount of options the player has to consider. It all feels very mathematical at times, like there's all this kind of number crunching going on with all the different stats and skills. It carries across to every facet of the game, and the combat is the best indicator of this. Now, combat in Fallout 3 isn't so much based around skill as it is just a roll of the dice. Avoiding enemy attacks is practically impossible, especially against other enemies with ranged weapons, so what it all just boils down to is shooting someone as fast as you can, hoping your health points, resistance to damage, and damage output is greater than theirs. Difficulty modes just seem to affect the health points an enemy has, making them an absolute bullet sponge at the highest difficulty, making fighting them about as much fun as smacking your head on a wall over and over. But even early on, enemies just seem to soak up bullets like it's little more than a slap on the bum, and it can be very tedious. Fallout 3 uses something called Vats, which is short for Vault Tech Targeting System, which allows you to pause during combat and make precise shots on an enemy's body parts. So I guess the idea here is that you can shoot someone's arm, for instance, and they're unable to use a weapon. Shoot their legs and they can't chase after you, or shoot an insect's antenna and it loses all coordination. Now, this is a neat idea, and it does work at times, but it's also easier, faster, more effective, more damaging, and just more fun to target someone's head and literally blow it off their goddamn shoulders. I never get sick of watching heads explode or fly across a room after leaving someone's torso. Outside of Vats though, it seems that weapons lack any real sense of impact or power, and there's always some sort of slight delay when switching weapons or just firing them in general. On the whole, the shooting just feels very flat and uninspired, with the effect of firing weapons often contradictory to what is going on during combat. The minigun is a great example of this. It's a huge weapon that fires like a bazillion rounds a minute, and yet unless you're spec'd towards using it, you can fire 100 rounds into someone's face and it does practically nothing. Despite the fact that in real life, anything even remotely in front of it would be turned into mincemeat in seconds. Now, I know they had to do this to make certain weapons fall into different categories or whatnot, but what they should have done was make weapons only usable once you reached a certain level. So you could use a pistol from the get-go, for instance, but you might have to reach level 15 or so to use a minigun or a flamethrower. This isn't a unique concept. Practically every RPG has used this level restriction mechanic. As it stands, you can use flamethrowers, missile launchers, and miniguns the moment you set foot into the Wasteland, metaphorically before you've even got hair on your chest, and yet they will just do insultingly low amounts of damage. Look, it's not that much of an issue, but I guess my point is a weapon should do base damage regardless of the level of the player. A flamethrower's jet doesn't get any hotter the better you are at using it, and likewise, bullets don't magically become more damaging. That's not how guns work. If you're a lower level player, then yes, it should be instilled that you can't use the weapon as well as a higher level player could. This could be conveyed by more recoil, poor accuracy, or it might take you ages to reload, but the level of the player and their skills in a weapon class should never affect the base damage of the gun itself. It's just weird design, and it makes no sense, even in the world of video game logic. It seems weapons are generally very ineffective and underpowered for a period of time, and then you get to about level 14 or 15 and your weapons will disintegrate everything in a matter of hits. Enemy types that you once feared and despised coming across in the Wasteland are now trivial and mere fodder because, you know, your combat shotgun or your Gatling laser sends them onto the afterlife before they can so much as let out a whimper. This kind of thing is actually incredibly humorous, and there's even a perk called Bloody Mess that amplifies this ability. The only downside to this is having to search for their splattered body parts so you can loot them for gear, but it's so entertaining that it outweighs this slight inconvenience. You're able to team up with a companion at points throughout the game who come along and fight alongside you, and it gets to a point where your companion will kill an enemy often before you even realize you're under attack. Likewise, you go from scrounging around for supplies early on to having so much shit that you don't even have a place to sell it, due to merchants not having enough currency to trade with. These are just minor faults more than anything else. They're not game-breaking bugs, which is something the game seems to be synonymous with. In all fairness, a lot of the technical issues with Fallout 3 I feel are a bit overstated. Yeah, don't get me wrong, I've had plenty of times when things don't work the way they're supposed to. I can't speak for the console versions as I've never played them, but the PC version is pretty stable most of the time, apart from the expected crashes you get from a game that is running several hundred algorithms at any one time. In all honesty, I just think there's people out there who are professional Fallout 3 haters, if that makes sense. They don't like Bethesda, they don't like Liam Neeson's voice, they don't like the way the Brotherhood of Steel is represented, Dogmeat is stupid, the colours are ugly, whatever. On that note, visually the game gets the job done. The outdoor areas are very impressive with a huge draw distance, and most interior areas look really good. Character models are a bit basic, and about the only indication you get of someone's mood during dialogue is a raised eyebrow or slightly raised voice.
Wait! Oh shit!
It's not Source engine level facial animation, let me put it that way. The engine is built for functionality, and it mostly succeeds at that. I guess one thing that I do agree with is that the Wasteland is a very barren and lifeless place. Aside from the odd encounter with NPCs, nothing much goes on out there. Compared to the Stalker games, for instance, where the zone was a living, breathing entity that continued on whether or not you were around. As opposed to Fallout 3, where it feels like the world is waiting for you, if that makes sense. But if you're hating the game for other personal reasons, then I guess I can't argue with that, but objectively where it matters, Fallout 3 doesn't really have all that much wrong with it. And it is largely a very enjoyable, addictive and engrossing game with incredible scope and limitless ways to play it. And it's just one of those games. I mean, every time I reinstall it and start playing through it again, the next thing I know, bang, I've been playing for 10 hours. I could go on and on about this game. I could spend an entire video talking about each of the DLC. The Game of the Year edition includes the Broken Steel DLC, which allows you to continue playing the game after the end of the final story mission, which normally just threw you back to the main menu. And it also includes the other half dozen DLC questlines as well, all of which are pretty damn good. I didn't even mention all the random encounters, the fast travel system, or go into depth about the more notable side quests, which is maybe a good thing.
What will it be then? Rapiers? Pistols at dawn? Out with it!
Playing Fallout 3 and experiencing all of this stuff for yourself is the best part about all of it. No one should be denied what they've got in store for them the first time they come up against a Deathclaw, for instance. Or the first time they explore a location like the Dunwich Building, the Oasis, or Vault 108. Then there's all the countless visual mods, the gameplay tweaks and so forth that make it even more unique. But I will say it's one of those games you need to be patient with. You're not just going to load up a new character and start killing bandits and mutants right away. If you can put up with an initial learning curve and a few hours of trudging around and scrimping by, then you will be rewarded by the outcome. Once you learn all the nuances and decide what type of character you want to be, it's a very satisfying experience, the type that saps away your day off work because you lost the track of time. The sequel/spin-off Fallout New Vegas did largely improve the core mechanics of the game as well as modifying a few other parameters to make it seem entirely different. It isn't a full-blown sequel, but it offers up enough new stuff to make itself stand apart from Fallout 3. And in the next video, Sunny Jim, we'll take a look at New Vegas and see how it compares.